My father died looking for you." The words echoed through the marble hallway of the luxury apartment like a gunshot. Harrison Wells froze, his hand still on the doorknob, his face draining of all color. Before him stood a boy, no more than 13 years old, drenched in snow, trembling from the cold. But his eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to cut through the coldness of Manhattan. "Who are you?" Harrison asked, his voice coming out as barely a hoarse whisper. "How did you get in here?" "My name is Liam." "Liam Wells," the boy answered, still standing in the hallway, water from the snow dripping from his worn clothes onto the polished marble floor. "And you knew my father. You knew him very well." Harrison felt his heart race. Wells. That last name tore open a scar he had spent 23 years trying to seal. "I don't know what you're talking about, kid. Get off my property." "Now," Harrison said, trying to close the door. But Liam wedged his foot in the threshold. "My father's name was Marcus Wells. You know who he is, don't you?" Liam continued, his voice breaking. "Or rather, who he was. Because he's dead. He died 7 years ago. In a car accident." The entire apartment seemed to be spinning. Harrison gripped the doorframe. "Marcus," the word escaped Harrison's mouth like a ghost. "You're lying." "Would I lie about my father's death?" Liam asked, tears beginning to stream down his face, mixing with the snow. "Would I have come all the way here, to Manhattan, in the worst winter of the year, to make up stories? Or maybe you didn't even know he had a son. Maybe you didn't even know he had a whole life without you." Harrison opened the door completely, his expression shifting from coldness to a mixture of horror and confusion. "Come in, quick, before you freeze," he said automatically, his corporate hospitality instincts overriding his desire to hear no more. Liam stepped inside, his wet shoes leaving damp prints on the marble floor that cost more than everything he owned in this world. He looked around, taking in the full-floor apartment, the view of Manhattan, the artwork on the walls worth millions. "Nice," Liam said bitterly, "very nice. My father lived most of his life in a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. You know how much the rent was? $300 a month. He worked at a shelter for abandoned children. Children like me." Harrison blinked, processing the information. You're Marcus's son?" he asked, his voice weak. "I'm your grandson, Mr. Wells," Liam replied, something close to contempt in his young voice. "My father adopted me when I was 5 years old. He had been looking for you for years. He tried millions of times throughout his life. He sent letters. I received some," Harrison began, and Liam laughed, a humorless laugh. "You received them? My father told me you tore them up without reading them, that you tried to block him, that you hired lawyers to keep him from making contact," Liam said, his voice trembling with anger. He had only one wish in life, Murdoch Wells. Just one. It was for you to forgive him, for you to understand that he wasn't throwing his life away. He was building something that money could never buy. Harrison felt his legs weaken. He walked slowly to an expensive leather armchair and sat down. "Liam, I didn't," Harrison began. "Do you know what my father's last words were?" Liam interrupted, his hands shaking. "On the night of the accident, when he knew he was going to die, he asked the paramedics to find your number. He asked them to call you. He said he wanted to hear your voice one last time. Liam, please, Harrison whispered. Do you know what they found when they tried to call? Liam continued, relentless. A voicemail saying that Mr. Wells did not accept calls from unknown numbers. Unknown numbers, sir. Your own son was a stranger to you. Tears finally began to fall down Harrison's face. The first tears he had cried in 7 years. Since the night he had received the news of Marcus's death. I didn't know, he murmured. He wanted you to know, Liam said, his young voice carrying a maturity no child should have. He wanted you to understand that happiness doesn't come from this. He pointed around the luxurious apartment. He wanted you to understand that he forgave you, that he always loved you, even though you never loved him. Harrison looked at this boy, his grandson, and for the first time in decades, his corporate empire, his wealth, his absolute power seemed completely empty. Why did you come? Harrison asked, his voice almost inaudible. Because before he died, my father made me promise I would find you, Liam answered. That I would come here and say exactly this. You turned your back on the man who loved you most. And now every word I'm about to speak is going to completely destroy everything you've built. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, almost tangible in the full-floor living room of the most powerful man in Manhattan. Harrison remained seated in the armchair, his mind struggling to process the words he had just heard. Liam was still standing, wet, trembling, but with a dignity that seemed far too old for such a young boy. Harrison finally stood up, walked to a crystal bar, and poured 2 glasses of water. Sit down, he said, offering a glass to Liam. Please. Liam hesitated for a moment, then sat in a different chair, as if he didn't want to be too close to Harrison. The water trembled in his hands as he drank. Are you hungry? Harrison asked, noticing how thin the boy was, almost frail. I didn't come here for charity. Liam replied sharply, It's not charity. It's basic hospitality, and you're your family, Harrison said, the words coming out with difficulty. Liam looked at Harrison with eyes that he now recognized as identical to Marcus's. The same blue eyes his son had, the same way of staring at him when he disagreed. My father lived in a small apartment in Chicago, Liam began, his voice calmer now. 1 bedroom, a living room, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people. The walls were thin. In winter, the cold seeped through the cracks. But it was ours, Mr. Wells. It was my father's. He cleaned it every day, took care of that place as if it were a palace. Harrison sat down again, mesmerized by the words. He woke up at 5 in the morning. Liam continued. Every day, he went to work at the shelter where he met me. I was 5 years old when my mother abandoned me in a cardboard box behind a restaurant. My father found me during one of his night shifts. He cried when he saw me. He cried. Harrison's hands were shaking. He raised you alone? Harrison asked. Yes. With the little he had, he made it work, Liam answered. He worked during the day at the shelter. At night he cleaned offices in buildings like this one. You know that man who cleans your building, Mr. Wells? The one who comes at night in a blue uniform. My father was like him. 4 years. Harrison had never really seen those men. He had passed by them thousands of times, his brain never even registering their existence. He never complained, Liam continued. Never said his life was unfair. He just loved. He loved the children at the shelter. He loved me, and he loved you. Even when you rejected him, Liam, I didn't know. Harrison began again, but Liam raised his hand. Let me finish, the boy said. Please. Harrison nodded, closing his mouth. He had a box, Liam continued, his voice breaking, under his bed. In it were all the letters you never answered. Christmas cards, birthday letters, photographs. He reread them constantly, hoping one day you would respond. Just one response. Just one word saying you cared. Tears now fell freely down Harrison's face. My father was an extraordinary man, Liam said, and there was pride in his young voice. He had no money, no connections, no power, but he had something you never had, Mr. Wells. He had peace. He went to sleep every night knowing he had made a difference in someone's life, that he had loved and been loved. How did you get here, Liam? Harrison asked. From Chicago to Manhattan, alone. In winter, Liam looked at the empty glass in his hands. My father left instructions. In his will, Liam answered. Well, it wasn't an official will. He didn't have money for that. It was just a piece of paper, handwritten, that I found after he died. It said he wanted me to see you, for me to tell you how he lived, how he died, and for me to ask you one thing. What? Harrison whispered. If you had the chance to go back in time, if you could have one conversation with him before he died, what would you say? Liam asked, his eyes fixed on Harrison's. Harrison didn't answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was so weak that Liam could barely hear him. That I loved him. That I always loved him. That I was a weak and frightened man who confused ambition with meaning. That I wasted an opportunity most people never get. To know my son. To watch him grow up. To be there for him when he needed me. Liam nodded slowly. He knew that, Liam said. My father knew you loved him, even when you couldn't say it. At the hospital, on the night of the accident, when the doctors said there was no hope, he asked for one thing, a piece of paper and a pen. What? Harrison asked. He wrote one paragraph. Just one, Liam answered, pulling from his pocket a yellowed piece of paper, folded hundreds of times, so fragile it seemed like skin. You can read it. Harrison reached out carefully, as if the paper were made of gold. He unfolded it with trembling fingers and read his son's words written for the last time on earth. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to see you while I was alive. But I want you to know that I spent my entire life without resentment. Every day I woke up, I chose to forgive you. I chose to believe that somewhere in the heart of that rich and powerful man, there was a father who couldn't show his love. I raised my son, Liam, with the hope that one day you would meet him, that you would see in his eyes everything you missed with me. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand that a life lived with purpose and love is infinitely more valuable than any wealth. I forgive you, Dad. I always have. And wherever I am, I'll be hoping you find peace. With eternal love, your son Marcus. Harrison fell to his knees, the paper slipping from his hands, as he sobbed real deep sounds that came from a place so deep inside him that it seemed like he had never cried before in this life. And Liam, his grandson, this boy, who had traveled thousands of miles to destroy the man his father had loved, reached out his thin hand and touched Harrison's shoulder, his touch bringing a compassion that no money in the world could buy. Night fell over Manhattan while Harrison and Liam remained in the apartment. Hours passed. Liam had taken a hot shower, using a luxury towel that cost more than all his clothes combined. Harrison had food prepared, but Liam only ate a little, as if his stomach couldn't process anything after spending so long in such dire circumstances. Now they sat on opposite sides of the living room, the lit fireplace creating shadows that danced on the walls. Harrison looked at his grandson as if he were a ghost who could disappear at any moment. "Tell me about Marcus," Harrison said finally. "Tell me everything." Liam took a deep breath, as if preparing for a leap off a cliff. "My father was the kindest person I ever knew," Liam began. "And that's not just because he was my father. The people at the shelter said the same thing. The children loved him. There was an older boy named Ethan who had been through abuse. My father spent 2 years earning his trust. When Ethan finally left the shelter to go to a foster home, my father cried tears of joy for an entire week." Harrison closed his eyes, picturing the son he had never really known. "You mentioned that Marcus tried to contact me several times," Harrison said. "How many letters? How many attempts?" 73, Liam answered calmly. "I counted. Each one was dated. The first was sent on your 40th birthday. My father was 22 at the time. The last was a month before the accident. He wrote that he had adopted me, that I was the reason he had finally understood what you had lost by rejecting him." Harrison felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if someone had squeezed his heart. "Why didn't he give up?" Harrison asked, his voice breaking. "Why did he keep trying when I rejected him over and over?" "Because he was your son," Liam answered simply. "Because we don't give up on the people we love, even when they try to hurt us. My father used to say that you had the same pain in you that he saw in every child at the shelter, that you were lost, but had no one to find you." Harrison stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Down below, Manhattan glowed with 1 billion lights, and in the middle of that chaos was his apartment, his fortress of solitude. "You want to know the most ironic part?" Liam said, his voice carrying a bitterness that shouldn't exist in a 13-year-old child. "When my father died, we barely had enough money to bury him. I had to sleep at the shelter for 3 months. The children helped me get through it. Poor children, abandoned, with nothing, but they came together to protect me. And here you are, in an apartment that costs more than everything my father owned in his entire life. And you were alone." "Liam," Harrison began, turning around. "Let me speak," Liam interrupted, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Let me say what really hurts. My father had dreams for us. He wanted me to have an education, to go further than he ever could. He worked himself to the bone to save every penny. Every night he went out to clean offices. He did it thinking of me. And you were here, wasting your life, piling up money you can't even spend." The words fell like stones. Harrison absorbed them all. Do you know what my father's dream was? Liam continued. He wanted you to know him. He wanted you to know that he had become a good man, despite your failure to teach him how to be one. He wanted you to see that rejecting him had been your mistake, not his. He wanted forgiveness, but not for himself. He wanted to forgive you. He wanted you to know that it was possible to start over, that it's never too late to be better. Harrison sat down again, his whole body trembling. On the night of the accident, Liam continued, his voice now so low that Harrison had to lean forward to hear. My father was coming back from the shelter. He had worked an extra shift to get money for my birthday. That day I was turning 6. He had planned to take me to a park. He was so happy. I was in the back seat of the van, sleeping, and he was singing a song that his mother, Catherine, used to sing to him when he was little. He mentioned that song in one of the letters you never answered. Harrison blinked, the memory suddenly vivid. Catherine, his first wife, Marcus's mother. She had died when Marcus was only 8 years old. How do you know that? Harrison asked. Because he kept everything related to you, Liam answered. Photos, letters, even a voice recording on an old cassette tape where you were reading him a bedtime story. When he was 3 years old, he listened to that recording constantly. He cried every time, but he listened. Harrison felt like he was going to faint. And then he asked, even though he knew the story would end in tragedy. And then a truck lost control in the rain. The brakes failed. The driver couldn't swerve. Liam answered, his voice becoming mechanical, as if he had told this story so many times that the emotion had been squeezed out of it. The van was crushed. My father tried to protect me with his body. The paramedics said my father was still conscious when they arrived. He asked about me first. Then he asked them to call you. Dear God, Harrison murmured. When you refused the call, he asked them to call again and again. 3 times, Mr. Wells. 3 times your dying son tried to hear your voice one last time, and 3 times you refused him because he was an unknown caller, Liam said. And now his tears fell. Harrison collapsed forward completely, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to be coming from the same place, where his heart had died 23 years ago. Liam watched his grandfather fall apart, and something in his anger began to transform into compassion. Even so, he kept talking, because there was more to be said, more truths that needed to be whispered in that lonely apartment. Before he died, my father held me in his arms. The doctors tried to stop him, but he was firm. He whispered in my ear, Liam, you're going to meet your grandfather one day. You're going to travel far away, to a big, cold place, and you're going to find him. When you find him, you're going to tell him that you love him, and that I loved him too. Will you do that for me? Harrison raised his head, his eyes red and swollen. And you came, Harrison whispered. You really came. I promised my father, Liam said. But I also came because I need to know. What is the point of having so much and feeling so empty? The silence that followed was absolute. Harrison remained with his head in his hands, processing the question his grandson had asked. What was the point of having so much and feeling so empty? It was the question he had avoided answering for himself his entire life. His eyes passed over each painting, each multi-million-dollar investment in art he had never truly appreciated. Canvases by Monet, Dolly, Picasso, all purchased not because he loved them, but because they added value, because they demonstrated power and wealth. When your grandmother, Catherine, died, Harrison began, his voice hoarse. I was 42 years old. Do you know what my first reaction was? It wasn't grief. It was anger. Anger because she had chosen to leave me. Anger because life wasn't fair. And instead of trying to connect with Marcus, instead of being a refuge for each other, I blamed him for her death. I blamed him for being too weak to save her. Liam listened, his eyes fixed on his grandfather. Marcus was a frightened boy. Harrison continued. He had lost his mother and his father. This man standing before you decided it would be better to bury himself in work than face that pain with him. I sent him to boarding schools. I kept him away. And when he finally grew up and found his own way of dealing with life, I despised him for it. Harrison ran his hand along the wall, his fingers lightly brushing the valuable paintings. He wanted to be a teacher, Harrison said, as if discovering this for the first time. Did you know that? In college, he changed his major from law to social work. I tried to stop him. I said horrible things. I said he was wasting his potential, that he was lazy, that he would never amount to anything in life. The tears began to fall again. And do you know what he said? Harrison asked, turning to Liam. Do you want to know what Marcus said when I threw him out of the house? He said, Dad, I'm sorry you feel my life is a failure, but I'm going to spend my days helping children who need hope. And that will make more of a difference than any amount of money you manage to pile up. Liam felt a lump in his throat hearing his father's words echoed by the man who had raised him. I literally threw him out. Harrison continued. That day, I pushed him out the door with his bags. He was only 21 years old. Do you understand? 21 years old, and his father discarded him like he was garbage. Harrison sat down again, this time in a chair near Liam, but still keeping his distance, as if he knew he didn't deserve to be close. Why are you telling me this? Liam asked, his voice softening slightly. Because you deserve to know the complete truth, Harrison answered. Because your father deserves to be honored with the correct memory of him. And because I need to confess what I really am. Harrison walked to a crystal table in the corner of the room. On it sat a photograph framed in silver. He picked it up with trembling hands and held it out to Liam. It was Harrison and Marcus, together in a park. Marcus was approximately 15 years old. Both were smiling. It was one of the few photos where there was no tension between them. That was the time, Harrison said, watching Liam examine the image. Before everything fell apart, before I let my fear and my pain turn me into a man incapable of loving his own son. Why did you keep this photo? Liam asked. Because it was a reminder of the day when he still loved me, Harrison answered. That day, Marcus hadn't given up. He still believed his father could change, that we could be a family. 3 months later, I threw him out. And it took 23 years for me to realize what I had done. Liam placed the photo in Harrison's lap. Do you know what hurts the most? Liam said, his voice full of contained emotion. It's that my father lived waiting for you. Not all the time, of course. There were days when he was happy, truly happy. But there was always a part of him reserved for you. A hope that one day you would wake up and see what you had lost. A hope that it would never be too late. And now it is too late, Harrison said, not as a question, but as a statement of an inescapable fact. Yes, Liam answered, and the weight of that single word seemed to crush both men. But maybe not for the two of us. Harrison looked at his grandson, confused. I came here to destroy you, Mr. Wells, Liam continued. When my father died, I was filled with rage. Rage at you, at God, at a universe that allowed such a good man to be taken from this world while men like you keep on living. I came to make you feel a fraction of the pain my father felt. You're succeeding, Harrison murmured. Yes, I am, Liam agreed. But do you know what I'm feeling now? It's not victory. It's sadness. It's the same sadness my father felt. Because by destroying you, I'm only perpetuating the cycle. I'm becoming like you were. Someone incapable of forgiving, incapable of loving without conditions. Harrison felt something break inside him. Something that had been frozen for so long he had forgotten he was capable of feeling. What do you want from me, Liam? Harrison asked, his voice so soft it was almost inaudible. What can I do now? How can I make up for 23 years of neglect? How can I make up for Marcus's death? Liam was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on his grandfather's hands, which trembled as they held the photo of a past that could not be changed. I don't know, Liam finally said, but I think my father would have started with an honest conversation. In that park, on that day, he pointed to the photo. He still believed you were capable of love. Maybe he was right. Maybe there's still time for you to discover who you really could have been. Harrison clutched the photo against his chest and wept, finally. For the first time in his life, not from anger or frustration, but from genuine remorse. And Liam, watching his grandfather fall apart, saw not a powerful man, but a broken man who had spent his life building walls when he should have been building bridges. The crisis had reached its peak. Now, what came next would be either the true transformation or the final end of a relationship that had never really begun. Dawn arrived silently over Manhattan. Harrison had offered the guest room to Liam, but the boy had insisted on sleeping in the living room, as if he still couldn't fully trust this man who was his grandfather. Harrison hadn't protested. He had spent the entire night in the library, surrounded by the letters he had finally searched for in a locked box at the back of his closet. 73 letters, 73 opportunities he had let slip away. At 4:37 in the morning, Harrison opened the first letter, dated 23 years ago. On the birthday Marcus had mentioned, the handwriting was young, uncertain, but full of hope. Dear Dad, today I turned 22. We haven't been in contact for 3 years, but I can't let this day pass without trying once more. I wanted you to know that I'm doing well. I got a scholarship for college. I'm going to study social work. I know you don't approve, but it's what my heart tells me to do. Maybe one day you'll understand that some dreams can't be measured in dollars. I hope I can tell you about this in person. With hope, Marcus. Harrison felt each word like a blow. He had received this letter. He vaguely remembered. It had been carelessly tossed in a drawer, forgotten. He continued reading. The second letter, a year later. The third, after another year. Each one told the journey of a man who was trying to build a meaningful life. There were letters about his first day working at a shelter for children. There were letters describing specific children he had helped. There was the letter where he mentioned teaching a boy named David, who had learned to read at 9 years old thanks to Marcus's patience. There were stories about birthday parties Marcus organized for children who had never had cake in their lives. And then, the most recent letter, dated just 1 month before the accident. Dad, this year has been transformative for me. I adopted a boy named Liam. He was only 5 years old. When I found him, he had been abandoned in a cardboard box. I see so much anger in the world, so much lack of love, and I constantly wonder where it comes from. And then I saw it in you, in us. You lost his mother when you were young, just as I lost mine. But instead of allowing that pain to bring us closer, it drove us apart. I don't want Liam to carry that anger. I want him to know that he is loved, that he is valuable, that he deserves everything good in this world. When he's old enough, I'm going to tell him about you. I'm going to tell him that his grandfather was a man who had forgotten how to love, but that somewhere inside him, there was still a spark of goodness. Because I have to believe that, Dad. I have to believe that even you can change. With infinite love, your son Marcus. Harrison was completely shattered when Liam woke up in the living room at 6:47 in the morning. The boy emerged from the blanket covering him and saw his grandfather sitting on the floor, surrounded by letters, his face completely wet with tears. Mr. Wells, Liam called softly, approaching carefully. Harrison raised his eyes, unable to speak. He simply held out the letters to Liam, who received them with an expression of confusion, and then understanding. And then his own pain resurfaced when he saw his father's handwriting. Did you read them? Liam asked. All of them, Harrison answered, his voice a whisper. I read all 73 letters during the night. I read every word he wrote to a man who didn't deserve his kindness. Liam sat down beside his grandfather, both of them surrounded by the echoes of a relationship that had never really begun. Do you know what hurts the most? Harrison said, picking up the last letter with trembling fingers. It's that he was right about me. When he wrote that there was a spark of goodness in me, he was right. Because that spark was always there, but I smothered it. I buried it under money and power and pride. Why did you do that? Liam asked, his young voice carrying a sincerity that cut through all of Harrison's defenses. Because I was afraid, Harrison answered. And it was the first time he had admitted this out loud. When Catherine died, I was destroyed. Completely destroyed. Marcus was a constant reminder of that loss. And instead of helping him process that pain, I blamed him for existing. I pushed him away because it hurt too much to be near him. Harrison slowly stood up, walking to the window. Down below, the city was beginning to wake up. Street cleaners were starting their shift. Yellow taxis were beginning to circulate. The world went on, indifferent to the private tragedy occurring in this luxury apartment. Do you want to know what's truly ironic? Harrison said, turning to Liam. I spent my entire life trying to control everything, trying to ensure that nothing could hurt me again. And in the end, The only thing that really hurt me was this illusion of control. Marcus was trying to save me, and I pushed him away. He's trying again, Liam said softly. Through me. Harrison looked at his grandson, seeing in him Marcus's blue eyes, the same determination, the same innate kindness. What do you want me to do, Liam? Harrison asked. Is there something I can do to honor your father's memory? Is there something I can do to not perpetuate the cycle of pain he so desperately tried to break? Liam was silent for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to the couch, patting the space beside him. Sit down, Liam said, and tell me about my father, about Marcus when he was a child, about the man he was before I came into the world. Tell me the stories he should have heard from you. Harrison looked at his grandson for a long moment, finally understanding what Marcus had tried to do through him, understanding that this opportunity, this second chance, had been his son's final gift. Harrison sat down beside Liam and began to tell stories. Stories about Marcus when he was 7 years old, and insisted on bringing food to the pigeons in Central Park. Stories about Marcus at 10 when he had asked for a used computer to teach neighborhood kids about technology. Stories about Marcus at 15, who had questioned for the first time whether there was something more important than money in life. And as he told them, Harrison began to remember who his son really was. Not the man he had rejected, but the boy he had been, and the extraordinary man he had become despite or perhaps because of the father who had abandoned him. For the first time in 23 years, Harrison Wells began to live again, and it was through his grandson's eyes that he finally saw the man his son had been. The sun rose over Manhattan, while grandfather and grandson remained together, finally connected through the memory of a man who had never stopped trying to reach him. At noon, after a night of emotional catharsis and shared stories, Liam looked at Harrison with a serious expression. I need to show you something, Liam said. Before I leave, I need you to see the place where my father worked, the place where he spent his life building what you destroyed. Harrison felt panic take hold of him. Liam, I don't think I can face that right now, he began. It's not an option, Liam replied, his voice firm. You asked how to honor his memory. Well, this is how you start. 3 hours later, Harrison's private helicopter was taking them to Chicago. Liam had insisted they not travel first class, that they not live in the illusion of comfort while going to a place where children slept in donated beds and ate meals prepared by volunteers. The Marcus Wells Welcome Center was located in a neighborhood Harrison had never visited, a neighborhood where the buildings were old, where the streets needed repairs, where children played in parks with equipment worn by time. The building itself was an old factory that had been converted. It had been renovated with care, but even so it was obvious that every dollar had been counted. However, what it lacked in luxury was made up for in warmth. The walls were colorful with murals painted by the children themselves. There were toys scattered on the floor. There was the sound of children's laughter coming from a room in the back. A middle-aged woman with gray hair and a warm smile came out of the kitchen. Liam, she exclaimed, hugging the boy. You're back! And who is this? This is Harrison Wells, Liam answered calmly. My grandfather. The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret, one of the center's main caregivers, blinked several times, her expression changing completely. "Mr. Wells?" Margaret asked, her voice shifting in tone. "The Harrison Wells." "Yes," Harrison answered, feeling completely out of place in that space. Margaret observed him for a long moment, and Harrison saw multiple emotions pass across her face: anger, disappointment, and then something like compassion. "Come," Margaret finally said. "There's something you need to see." She led them through the center. There were children of all ages, some playing with worn plastic toys, others studying around makeshift tables. All of them seemed to know Liam, hugging him as if he were an older brother. "How do you keep this place running?" Harrison asked, observing the simple but efficient operations. "Donations," Margaret answered, "and a lot of love. Marcus left some funds when he passed. But the truth is we survive because the people who matter keep having faith in this institution." Margaret led them to a room that had been converted into an office. On the wall, there was a large framed photo of Marcus. He was surrounded by children, his face radiant with happiness. 23 children passed through this center under Marcus's leadership, Margaret said, pointing to a wall full of photos. 23 children who were placed in foster homes, who now have families, who have education, who have futures. Margaret picked up a file from a shelf. "This is from a girl named Eleanor. She arrived here at 5 years old, impossible to control, furious at the world. Marcus worked with her for a year. Today she's 10 years old, was adopted by a loving family, and is the best student in her school. She writes letters to Marcus every week. She wants to be a psychologist because she wants to help other children like her." Harrison felt tears burning his eyes. "And this is Oliver," Margaret continued, showing another photo. "He had been abandoned at the hospital as a baby. Marcus insisted on finding a home for him. Today he's 8 years old, a brilliant boy who loves math. His new father says Marcus changed his entire family's life when he brought Oliver to them." Margaret closed the file and looked directly at Harrison. "Do you know what Marcus told me on his last day of work?" Margaret asked. "A week before the accident. He said, 'Margaret, my father spent his whole life accumulating things. But I want to accumulate memories. I want to know that when I leave, I left marks on people's hearts, not buildings. I left love, not profit.'" Harrison fell into a chair, unable to hold himself up. "He was right," Harrison murmured. "He was absolutely right." "Yes, he was," Margaret agreed. "And more than that, Mr. Wells, he forgave you. Completely. Liam, didn't you know? Your father left something for you to find." Margaret went to a safe hidden behind a picture frame and removed a letter, still sealed. "He asked that if something happened to him, I give this to Liam when he was old enough, and for Liam to meet you, so that you would know your son had built a legacy that money could never buy." Liam took the letter with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in familiar handwriting. "Open it," Margaret said gently. "It's time." Liam opened the letter and began to read aloud. "My dear Liam, if you're reading this, it means I left earlier than I'd planned. I want you to know that the life I had, even though brief, was complete. Because I had you. Because I had purpose. Because I helped people. I want you to find your grandfather. I want you to know him. And I want him to know that I forgave him many years ago. That I didn't die with anger or resentment. I died with peace, with the hope that one day, maybe, he'll understand that love is the only thing that truly matters. That he'll become a wonderful grandfather to you. That he'll use his wealth and power not to accumulate more, but to help people like the ones I worked with here. This center is my legacy. You are my legacy. If possible, make this grow. Make it so more children have hope. You can do this. You're strong enough. Daddy loves you forever. Harrison collapsed completely. His body was shaken by sobs that seemed to come from his very core. Margaret placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Your son didn't hate you, Mr. Wells, Margaret said. He loved you. And now you have the chance to prove he was right. You have the chance to show that inside you there still exists that spark of goodness he saw. Liam watched his grandfather fall apart, and for the first time since his journey began, he felt that maybe, just maybe, there was redemption possible for Harrison Wells. During the following week, Harrison and Liam stayed in Chicago. Harrison visited every square foot of the center Marcus had helped build. He talked with every child who was there. He listened to stories of transformed lives, of restored hope. On the third day, Harrison did something he had never done in his business life. He cried in front of his clients. He was in a video conference meeting with his executive director when a call came from the center. A girl named Grace, who had been adopted thanks to Marcus's work, had passed an advanced placement test for an elite preparatory school. When Margaret shared the news, saying Grace had dedicated her achievement to Marcus's memory, Harrison disconnected from the meeting and simply cried. His executive director had never seen him do that. Mr. Wells? Liam asked, approaching with concern. I wasted so much time, Harrison murmured. So much time building things that don't matter. On the fifth night, Liam and Harrison were in the hotel room, sharing a simple meal of Mexican food that Liam had insisted on ordering. No luxury restaurants, no fancy food, just honest, simple food. My dad liked this, Liam had said when he ordered. Food that warmed your heart, not just your stomach. Harrison was learning lessons he should have learned decades ago. Liam, Harrison said, putting his fork down, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Okay, Liam replied, chewing a piece of enchilada. Have you forgiven me? Harrison asked. Really? Or are you here out of loyalty to your father? Liam put his fork down too, and thought seriously before answering. At first, I came to destroy you, Liam answered with brutal honesty. I was full of rage. Rage because my father died waiting for a message that would never come. Rage because you were here, alive, thriving, while he was in the ground. Harrison swallowed hard. But then I read those letters with you. Liam continued. I saw you really cry. Not that performative crying. That crying that comes from the place where you keep your wounds. And I understood something my father always knew. You were also a child who had been hurt. You had also been abandoned by death. And instead of asking for help, you built walls. Liam picked up a glass of water and drank. I don't forgive you for the past, Liam said, but I'm willing to forgive you for the future. If you're willing to change, what do you want me to do? Harrison asked. I want you to be my grandfather, Liam answered simply. Not the rich man who throws money at problems. I want you to be the man who truly loves, who is present, who sits and eats enchiladas with me and talks about things that matter. Harrison reached his hand across the table and Liam squeezed it. I can do that, Harrison said. I will do that. On the flight back to New York, Harrison began making changes. He called his executive director and gave specific instructions. I want you to transfer 50% of my holdings to a fund for underprivileged children, Harrison said. Focus on education, shelters, welcome centers. I want every dollar accounted for. I want complete transparency, Mr. Wells. That's hundreds of millions of dollars. His director protested. Exactly, Harrison replied. And I'm not going to use a single cent of it. I'm going to keep living on my executive salary. The rest will go where it can make a difference. When they landed in Manhattan, Liam turned to Harrison in the private car taking them to the apartment. There's one more thing, Liam said. What? Harrison asked. I want to go to school, Liam answered. A good school, the one my father always dreamed of for me. You want that? Harrison asked. I do, Liam confirmed. And I want you to meet my teachers. I want you to come to my school events. I want you to be present. Harrison felt his heart tighten. It would be an honor, Harrison said. 2 weeks later, Liam was enrolled at Dalton School, one of the best private schools in New York. Harrison paid not only for his education, but created a scholarship fund for low-income children. The school's headmaster was shocked by the generosity, but even more impressed when Harrison asked to meet every child who had received a scholarship. I want to know their names, Harrison explained. I want to know their stories. Because each of them is Marcus, each of them is someone who deserves a chance. On Liam's first day of school, Harrison accompanied him personally. He didn't send a driver. He didn't wait in the car. He walked into the school and walked alongside his grandson, his hand on the boy's shoulder. The teachers commented afterward that there were tears in the eyes of the well-dressed man who had brought the new student. That evening, when they returned to the apartment, Harrison prepared dinner. Nothing elegant, nothing fancy, just simple. Made with his own hands, something he hadn't done in decades. How was your first day? Harrison asked as he set the food on the table. It was good, Liam answered. Scary, but good. Your father would be so proud of you, Harrison said. And of me too, for being here, for trying to be better. Liam smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Dad knew you could change, Liam said. He always knew. Harrison sat down next to Liam and took his hand. Did you know Marcus left specific instructions in his will? Liam asked. No, Harrison answered. Was there something else? There was, Liam confirmed. He asked that when I was old enough, we visit a specific bookstore in Chicago. There's a book there that he wanted you to have. What book? Harrison asked. He didn't say, Liam answered. He said you would know which one it was when you saw it. 3 months later, when Christmas break arrived, Harrison and Liam flew to Chicago. They visited the bookstore, a small independent shop Marcus had frequented. The owner, An elderly man recognized Liam immediately. "Ah, Liam, Marcus's son," he exclaimed. "Your father said you might come one day. He left something for you." The man went to a special shelf and removed an old book with a worn leather cover. "This book," the owner said, "Marcus read dozens of times. It was his favorite. He asked that if you came, I give it to your grandfather, so that he would understand what his son had tried to convey his entire life." The book was titled The Boy Who Learned to Love. Harrison opened it and saw a note on the first page, written in Marcus's hand. "For my father, in the hope that one day you'll understand that loving is more important than having." Marcus. Harrison fell into tears again. But this time it wasn't from grief or remorse. It was from recognition, from final understanding, from redemption. 1 year after the encounter that would change their lives, Harrison Wells was a completely different person. Not superficially, internally, Liam had adapted well to Dalton's school. His grades were excellent, but more importantly, he had found friends. He had found joy in being a child. He had begun to heal the wounds of being abandoned. Harrison, for his part, had undergone a transformation his business colleagues could barely recognize. His office, which had once been a monument to corporate ego, now displayed a large photo of Marcus and Liam. His executive meetings began with a simple question: how will this help people? The answer wasn't always yes, and when it wasn't, Harrison declined the deal. His competitors thought he had gone insane. His investors were confused. But something extraordinary was happening. The company was profiting even more, because Harrison's decisions were now based on real value, not just financial gain. "Do you know what's curious?" Harrison said to Liam one evening in his apartment, while they did homework together. "What?" Liam asked, working on an essay about business ethics. "That when you stop trying to win everything, you end up gaining so much more," Harrison answered, "including peace of mind." Liam smiled and returned to his assignment. During the months that followed, Harrison and Liam developed rituals. Every Thursday night was Marcus night. They cooked something simple, visited the Welcome Center virtually, and read Marcus's letters aloud. There was one ritual in particular that was sacred. Every time a child was placed in an adoptive home through the center, Harrison and Liam made a donation in Marcus's name and sent a welcome letter to the new family. "Your grandfather funded your adoption with love," they would write. "May you always know that there are people in this world who believe you are special." Many of the children wrote back. Harrison received hundreds of letters from children describing their new homes, their new family members, their hopes for the future. A girl named Sophia, who had been placed in a home with 2 loving mothers, wrote, "Dear Mr. Wells, I want you to know that my new mommy and my other mommy read me the story of Marcus before bed. They say he was an angel who helped children like me find love. You're an angel too. Thank you for giving me a family." When Harrison received that letter, he showed it to Liam. "You know," Harrison said, "your father was right. Loving really is the only business that matters." On the 2nd anniversary of Marcus's death, Harrison made a public announcement. His company, Wells Industries, was creating the Marcus Wells Foundation, a $1 billion fund dedicated specifically to underprivileged children, with a focus on education, care, and opportunities. The press conference was broadcast nationally. Journalists expected to hear about taxes and deductions. What they heard was Harrison crying as he spoke about the son he had lost and the grandson he had found. "My son, Marcus Wells, spent his entire life helping children," Harrison said, his voice trembling. "He died living his values. I spent my life accumulating things and losing people. Today, I honor his memory by dedicating not just money, but my time, my energy, and my heart to continuing his work. Because Marcus was right. Loving is more important than having." The reaction was immediate. Other corporations began matching with donations. Politicians began reviewing child welfare legislation. Schools began implementing programs based on Marcus's philosophy. Liam watched the conference from school surrounded by his new friends and saw his grandfather for the first time not as a man who had failed, but as a man who was trying to be better. After the conference, Harrison picked up Liam from school, as they did every Thursday. "I'm proud of you," Liam said when he got in the car. "Of me?" Harrison asked, surprised. "Yes," Liam replied. "You didn't give up, even when it was hard. Even when it would have been easier to pretend nothing had changed. You changed." Harrison reached out his hand, and Liam squeezed it. That night, Liam did something he had been considering for months. He released the truth he had been holding inside. "Grandpa," Liam said, sitting down next to Harrison in the living room. "Yes?" Harrison responded. "You asked me to be honest with you about my feelings," Liam began. "Well, I am. I'm happy. For the first time in my life, I'm truly happy. Not because you're rich, not because you can give me things, but because you're here, because you care, because you chose to change." Harrison hugged his grandson, and both men cried together, not from grief, but from genuine joy. Months passed. Liam completed his first year at Dalton School with honors. Harrison attended every school performance, every parent meeting, every important moment in his grandson's life. But the truly transformative moment came when Liam turned 14. Harrison had planned a surprise party, not at a fancy restaurant, not at an exclusive club. At the Marcus Wells Welcome Center in Chicago, Liam arrived and found dozens of children he had met, educators he had helped, and people whose lives he had touched. At the end of the party, Margaret, the center's director, asked to speak. "Liam," Margaret said into the microphone, "your father would have been 52 years old today. He would have spent that day here, working, loving, serving. But because he left early, he left you. And you, my dear boy, you became his legacy." Margaret pointed to a plaque that had been hung on the wall, the Liam Wells Wing, dedicated to a young man who learned that loving is more important than anything. Liam burst into tears. Harrison embraced him. "Your father sees this," Harrison whispered in his grandson's ear. "Wherever he is, he sees you becoming the man he knew you could be." That night, while everyone slept, Harrison went to the library and reread Marcus's final letter, the one that had been his turning point. He knew it by heart now, but he read it every day, like a prayer, like a reminder of who he had been and who he was becoming. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, Harrison Wells slept in peace. 2 years. 2 years since Liam had arrived in a Manhattan hallway drenched in snow. Harrison was in his office when he received a call that made him completely collapse. It was Liam's school. Liam had disappeared. He had left for lunch and hadn't returned. The police were being called. Harrison's heart stopped. No, this couldn't be happening again. He couldn't lose Liam. He ran out of the building, despite his 54 years, despite his aching knee. He ran like a man possessed, screaming his grandson's name, pleading with God, with Marcus, with anything divine to keep that boy safe. When he arrived at the school, the police were already there, but it was to the nearest train station that Harrison ran. Because he knew his grandson. He knew where Liam would go if he needed to think. Chicago. Always Chicago. To be close to his father. Harrison caught the next flight, with his hands shaking so badly he could barely open his phone. He called Margaret at the center. Did Liam get there? He shouted into the phone, his voice breaking completely. Yes, Margaret answered. He's here. Everything's fine. He's okay. Harrison collapsed into the airplane seat, sobbing with relief so deep that the people around him moved away, frightened. When he arrived in Chicago, he drove directly to the center. Liam was in Marcus's room, the room they had created as a sanctuary, with photos of his father, with the letters, with books Marcus had read. Liam was curled up in a corner, hugging his knees, his face wet with tears. Liam, Harrison shouted, running to him, falling to his knees, embracing the boy as if he were an anchor that could have drifted away from him. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Liam sobbed, his whole body trembling. I just needed to be here. I needed to be close to him. What happened, son? What made you leave school like that? Harrison asked, holding Liam's face in his hands, checking every inch of him to make sure he was okay. Today is Dad's birthday, Liam said, his voice breaking. He would have been 55 today. And I was in history class, and the teacher was talking about people who made a difference in the world. And I started thinking about my father, about how he's never going to be known by anyone, how he's going to die and be forgotten. Liam's tears fell like rain. I thought about you, Liam continued, pointing at Harrison. You have a building with your name on it. People know Harrison Wells. But my father, Dad helped dozens of children, loved unconditionally, changed the world, and no one outside of here is ever going to know he existed. Harrison felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. Liam, Harrison said, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. Look at me. Liam raised his eyes, his blue eyes identical to Marcus's, filled with pain and doubt. Your father is being remembered every single day, Harrison said, and the tears fell endlessly down his face. By every child in this center, by every home that was created through his work, by every heart he touched, and by me. Your father saves me every day. He saves me because I see his work, and I remember who he was, and I strive to be better. Harrison pulled Liam into a hug so tight it seemed like he would never let go. Do you want to know what my deepest regret is, Liam? Harrison continued, his voice breaking into small pieces. It's not having lost years with your father. My deepest regret is having wasted the years I had. All those years when I could have said, I love you. I'm sorry. I'm proud of you. I wasted those years, and I'll never get them back. Liam felt as if his chest would explode with emotion. But you, Harrison continued, holding Liam's face, forcing the boy to look into his eyes. You're not going to waste your years. You're going to live the life your father lived. With purpose, with love, with meaning. And yes, people will know your name. But more important than that, people will feel your heart. They will know there was a boy named Liam who turned his grandfather's life upside down. Harrison kissed Liam's forehead, his lips wet with tears. I'm so proud of you, Harrison whispered. So incredibly proud. And your father is too. Wherever he is so proud. Liam collapsed into Harrison's embrace, and both men cried like they had never cried before. They cried for the loss. They cried for the redemption. They cried for the second chance they had been given with each other. Margaret had quietly left the room, giving grandfather and grandson space to process their grief and their joy. When they finally stopped crying, Harrison sat Liam beside him. I'm going to tell you a secret, Harrison said. Something no one knows. What? Liam asked, his eyes still reddened. When you arrived that day, in the snow, knocking on my door, I was thinking about suicide, Harrison confessed, and the admission came out as a broken whisper. I had planned it for that night. My life felt empty. It felt meaningless. I was the richest man in Manhattan and the poorest in spirit. Liam breathed deeply, processing. But then you came, Harrison continued, and you gave me the chance to know my son through you. You gave me the chance to be better. You saved me, Liam. You are my miracle. Harrison placed a small box in Liam's hand. What is this? Liam asked. Open it, Harrison answered. Inside was a gold key, delicate, antique. A real key, not symbolic. It's the key to the center, Harrison explained. It's an official transfer. Starting today, when you turn 18, the Marcus Wells Welcome Center will be yours. Completely yours. For you to run, for you to expand, for you to grow. Because you are your father's true heir. Not me, don't you? Liam looked at the key in his hands and began to cry again. You trust me? Liam asked. I trust you with my life, Harrison answered, and he meant every word. Because you are the best of Marcus. You are hope. You are love. You are everything that matters. Harrison lifted Liam and spun him in his arms. Something that years ago would have been impossible. Both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. I love you, Grandpa, Liam said, and it was the first time he had used that word. I love you too, my son, Harrison replied, because that was the true title Liam deserved, not just grandson. Because he had filled the void that Marcus's death had left. That night, grandfather and grandson slept at the center, in Marcus's room, surrounded by the memory of a man who had changed everything through his kindness. And for the first time, that room was no longer a sanctuary of sadness. It was a sanctuary of redemption. Because through Marcus's love, and through Liam's courage to demand better, Harrison Wells had finally learned what his son had tried to teach him his whole life. that loving is more important than having, that being present is more important than being powerful, and that redemption is always possible if you're willing to change. 5 years later, the auditorium of the Marcus Wells Welcome Center was completely packed. Journalists, politicians, celebrities, educators, and dozens of children who had been transformed through the work of Marcus and, now, of Liam. Liam Wells, at 19 years old, was the same height as his grandfather. He had his blue eyes, but his father's gentle heart. He stood on stage, in front of a microphone, about to make an announcement that would change the landscape of social services in the United States. In the front row, Harrison was seated, tears already streaming down his face, even before Liam had said a word. "Hello, everyone," Liam began, his voice clear and steady. "My name is Liam Wells. 5 years ago, my grandfather was a man who had everything except what truly mattered. I was a boy who had lost everything, including hope." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. My father, Marcus Wells, died trying to teach my grandfather that loving is more important than having. It took his death for my grandfather to finally understand, Liam continued, his voice trembling with emotion. But thanks to my grandfather's courage to change, thanks to the tireless work he has done, thanks to the legacy he left behind, I'm here today to announce something extraordinary. Liam took a deep breath. The Marcus Wells Foundation will expand to 25 new welcome centers over the next 2 years, not just in the United States, but around the world. In every country, there will be an institution dedicated to underprivileged children, education, and rehabilitation. Because my father believed that no child should be left behind. The auditorium erupted in applause. Harrison was crying so intensely that he needed a moment to compose himself. Liam continued, "But there's something more important than money. There's a message I want to share. A message my father lived and my grandfather finally understood. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to love. It's never too late for redemption." Liam pointed to Harrison. "That man right there is proof that hearts that have hardened can melt. That people who accumulate wealth can learn to give. That fathers who failed can become extraordinary grandfathers. If you're here today, if you're an adult who has made mistakes, who has hurt people, who has wasted opportunities, know that it's not too late. You can change. You can be better." Liam took a deep breath, his eyes shining with tears. "My father had a dream," Liam continued. "His dream was that one day, every child in this world would know they are loved, that they are valuable, that they deserve a future. Through all of us here, through the foundation, through the work we do every day, we are going to turn that dream into reality. Dad, if you're listening, I promise to honor your legacy. I'm going to create a world where no child is abandoned, where no child grows up without knowing they matter, where no child wonders if they deserve to be loved." Liam blinked, the tears finally falling. "I love you, Dad, and I'm so grateful you had me as your son, even for such a short time, because you taught me that loving is the greatest superpower there is." The entire auditorium was in tears. Reporters couldn't focus on their cameras through their own sobs. After the event, Harrison managed to reach Liam, and they embraced backstage. Out of sight of the media, in a sacred moment that belonged only to them. Your father would have said you were perfect, Harrison whispered. You think so? Liam asked. I'm certain, Harrison answered. Because you are his. You are everything he wanted this world to be. 3 months later, Harrison received news that made him collapse one final time. His cardiologist informed him that he had suffered a small silent heart attack. His heart, which had been so closed for so many years, was now failing. He had perhaps a few years, maybe less. When he told Liam, he expected tears. Instead, Liam simply smiled. You did your part, Grandpa, Liam said. You changed so you could leave a better legacy. Now it's my turn to carry the torch. Aren't you scared? Harrison asked. I am, Liam answered honestly. But my father wasn't afraid, even when he died. My father lived with purpose, and you learned to do that too. So we're both going to do that until the end. During the next year, as his health declined, Harrison spent every moment with Liam. They visited the center in Chicago. They traveled to see other centers they had created. They sat and listened to stories of children who had been saved. A girl named Rose came up to Harrison specifically. Are you Liam's grandfather? The 10-year-old girl asked. I am, Harrison confirmed. Well, I wanted to say thank you, Rose said. Because you helped my dad be better, and my dad teaches me about your family, about Marcus, about how loving is more important than having. You gave me hope. Harrison hugged that child and cried, because he finally understood. He finally comprehended that his legacy wasn't the buildings he had constructed. It was the change he had sparked in other people. On the night of his 59th birthday, Harrison was in the hospital. His heart was failing rapidly. The doctors had said it was a matter of days, maybe hours. Liam was at his side, holding his hand. Don't be afraid, Liam whispered. Dad is waiting for you. Harrison smiled, an expression of complete peace on his face. You know, Harrison said, his voice weak but clear, when your father died, I thought it had all been in vain. That he had lived an entire life helping people and still died young, without ever seeing the fruits of his work. And now? Liam asked. Now I understand, Harrison answered. He saw through you. He saw through me. He saw because he left a legacy that is greater than any of us. A legacy of love. Harrison took a deep breath, his body relaxing. Take care of the center. Liam, take care of the children. Take care of yourself. And live like your father lived. With purpose, with love, with hope. I will, Grandpa. I promise, Liam said, kissing his grandfather's hand. That night, Harrison Wells died peacefully, with his grandson at his side. The newspapers called him the tycoon who found redemption. His colleagues remembered him as a man who changed the business world. But to Liam, he was simply his grandfather, the man who had been broken and who had learned to love. 3 months later, Liam was inaugurating a new wing at the Marcus Wells Welcome Center. It was titled the Harrison Wells Wing, dedicated to a man who had learned that hearts can change, that fathers can find redemption, and that it's never too late to begin again. On the plaque was written a passage from one of Marcus's last letters. If you're reading this, and my father is still alive, I ask you, Dad, Believe that you can change. Believe that you can love. Because I believe. And when you finally understand, you'll see that this simple truth that loving is more important than having is all you ever needed to know. Liam placed his hand on the plaque and whispered. He finally understood. Dad, your father, my grandfather, finally understood. And in that moment, in a sacred place created through sacrifice and redemption, Marcus Wells's legacy continued, passed from one generation to the next, proving that love is the only business that truly matters. The story of a boy who lost everything, a grandfather who gained everything, and a father who never stopped believing in redemption. Because Marcus was right, it's never too late to change. It's never too late to love. And it is never too late to discover that a life lived with purpose is infinitely more valuable than any wealth the world can offer. If this story touched your heart as much as it touched mine while creating it, I'm already happy. Leave your like if you cried with me on this journey of redemption and love. It helps us so much to keep bringing stories that transform lives. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this. Every week we have new videos that will stir your emotions and restore your faith in humanity. Leave in the comments which moment of the story moved you the most. Do you believe in second chances? Do you know someone who needs to hear this story? Thank you for being here with me, for believing that stories like this matter, for being part of this community of people who understand that love is the greatest superpower. You are amazing.